Before there were save files, before online multiplayer, before achievements, before open worlds, there was a little black box with a joystick and one red button. The Atari 2600 wasn't the first home video game console, but for millions of people, it was the first one that mattered. For me, the Atari wasn't just another game system. It was the machine that taught me what video games could be. This is my gaming history. Last time I talked about the ColecoVision. For a while, our family actually played Atari games through the ColecoVision's expansion module instead of owning a real Atari. Looking back, that's kind of incredible. Imagine buying a PlayStation today and someone selling an attachment that let you play Xbox games. I don't think Microsoft would be too thrilled about that. Eventually, though, our ColecoVision days came to an end. We finally got an honest-to-goodness Atari 2600, not that classic wood-grain model everyone remembers. Mine was the later black version with the silver stripe across the top. That was my Atari. One thing I loved about the Atari was how uncomplicated everything felt. The controller, a joystick, one button, done. No triggers, no shoulder buttons, no analog sticks, no touchpad, no motion controls, just move and press. It's funny because modern controllers have become incredibly sophisticated. The Atari controller almost feels primitive by comparison. But there was something beautiful about its simplicity. Games had to be designed around very limited hardware, and somehow, developers still found ways to make them fun. Of course, there were exceptions. Some games used paddle controllers. Trying to explain those to someone who didn't grow up with them is surprisingly difficult. Imagine holding a little plastic box with a wheel you turn left and right. That was basically it. The game I remember most was Super Breakout. You moved your paddle, bounced the ball, and slowly chipped away at a wall of colorful bricks. Simple, addictive, surprisingly satisfying. Sometimes that's all a game needs to be. Now let's talk about one of the strangest games I ever owned, Raiders of the Lost Ark. If you've never seen it, well, here's some footage. It's fascinating. Not because it's good, because it's weird. Most Atari games ask you to use one controller. This one asks you to use two. Not two players, two controllers. One controller handled most of the game. The other was required to control your inventory. Somehow, I loved it. Looking back, what amazes me isn't the game itself. It's that we ever figured it out. Today, if we get stuck in a game, we can watch a walkthrough, we can read a guide, open Reddit, ask YouTube. Back then, none of that existed. You either experimented or you didn't finish the game. There was something magical about finally discovering what worked after hours of trial and error. Of course, you can't talk about the Atari without mentioning E.T. It's become legendary. People call it one of the worst games ever made. Some even blame it for the video game crash of 1983, and yes, I owned it. Here's the funny thing. I was 3 years old. I had absolutely no idea everyone supposedly hated it. To me, I was just playing as E.T. When I pressed the button, his neck stretched. That's awesome. Was it a good game? Probably not. But I also think history has turned E.T. into something almost mythical. The poor developer had only a few weeks to create a game based on one of the biggest movies ever made. That's almost impossible. It wasn't so much a failure of creativity as it was impossible expectations. But if I had to pick one Atari game that defined my childhood, it would be The Empire Strikes Back. What I appreciate now is how smart the design was. Instead of trying to recreate the entire movie, the developers picked one sequence, the Battle of Hoth, and that's it. You flew Luke's snowspeeder, destroyed AT-ATs, protected Echo Base, and every once in a while, the Star Wars theme would play and your ship would start flashing different colors Suddenly, you were invincible. To a little kid, that felt incredible. Sometimes less really is more. By the end of the Atari years, we had accumulated quite a collection. Pitfall, Yar's Revenge, Mario Brothers, Berserk, Haunted House, dozens of games. Ironically, we kept buying Atari games well after Nintendo had already taken over. Why? Because Atari games had become cheap, sometimes less than $20, maybe even under $10. That made it easy to keep expanding the collection. There was one game we never owned, Pac-Man. If you've ever seen the Atari version, and here it is, you know why. It's not exactly arcade perfect. Let's just leave it at that. Eventually, the Nintendo Entertainment System arrived, and I was late to the party. Really late. My cousin already had one. Whenever I visited his house, he got Player 1, naturally. But whenever he came to my house, he also got Player 1. His explanation? Guests first. Funny how that rule only worked in one direction. I still tease him about it to this day. When people look back at the Atari today, they often focus on what it couldn't do. The graphics were primitive, the sound was basic, the games were simple. All of that's true. But that's not why the Atari mattered. The Atari mattered because it introduced millions of kids, including me, to interactive storytelling, competition, imagination, to the simple joy of sitting in front of the television and saying, let's play one more game. Without consoles like the Atari 2600, there probably isn't a Nintendo Entertainment System, or a PlayStation, or Xbox, or Switch. Every generation has a machine that lights the spark, and for me, that spark came from a joystick with just one button. Honestly, I'd love to hold one again. Did you grow up with the Atari 2600? What games immediately take you back to your childhood? And where do you stand on E.T.? Was it really as terrible as history remembers? Or has its reputation grown larger than the game itself? I'd love to hear your memories down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip back through gaming history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more episodes of My Gaming History right here on The Confusing Middle. Thanks for watching.